Welcome to the College Football Bros. I am Michael Newman.
I am Ryan Newman.
And I'm Trey Newman.
All right, this is part 2 of our 4 episodes previewing the college football playoff. On today's episode, we're going to go over the reasons why Ohio State will or won't win the national championship. Let us know below in the comments which side you fall on. Give us your predictions as to what will happen for Ohio State. And in this series, we like to start with the positive. So let's go with the reasons why the Buckeyes will win it all. And Trey, why don't you get us started with the reasons offensively?
Sure. I mean, the offense, they had its issues versus Northwestern in the Big Ten Championship, but I'm attributing a lot of that to, they had a few players out due to COVID. Northwestern has a very good defense. The Buckeyes had some rust being off for a few weeks because of COVID as well. And then Fields even had a little minor thumb injury. So overall, though, when they're full strength, which they probably should be in this game or in the playoff, they're just so gifted on offense throughout most of the year. And even last year when we saw them in person against Nebraska, I would find myself saying, like, these guys are just cheat codes and it's just not fair. When they are humming, they are so fun to watch, so deadly. And Fields, when you look at this first game against Clemson, he's going to want to atone for his 2 picks that he threw in that game last year. When you look at the Buckeye offensive line, it's a strength that paved the way for the Big Ten's leading rush offense. We saw what Trey Sermon just did last week in the Big Ten title game. Insane. Every lineman, they're huge. They weigh 310 or above. That's going to help against a talented D-line in Clemson, but not quite as experienced as last year's. You got that offensive line, of course, led by Wyatt Davis. Overall, this offense, it's balanced enough through the air and the ground where they'd be capable to win it all.
Yeah, agreed. The balance is a key, because at times this season the rushing offense has been great. Other times the passing offense has been great. Hopefully it comes together in the playoff here. They're top 3 in the country in passing success rate, if I can speak here, and rushing success rate. So
all right,
that just goes to show you. And Fields' stats, even though he's struggled in their 2 toughest games this year, of course, against Northwestern and Indiana, he still had a great overall year. Like, his passer rating is actually higher than Trevor Lawrence. So he's capable, if his thumb is not an issue, and that's okay. He can have monster games in the playoff. I mean, we saw what he did all of last year with 41 touchdowns, 3 picks, something like that. So he's capable of being great.
Yeah, and I think what I was encouraged by in the Northwestern game was, I mean, they obviously put up a lot of yards. We weren't able to convert a lot, but just how great Trey Sermon was and how consistent he was. Like, they always kind of were going back and forth between him and Master Teague. I've always liked Trey Sermon better, and he was fantastic in the last game. Then also they're going to get Chris Olave back. Chris Olave didn't play in that Big Ten title game. He's awesome. He's, pair him up with a guy like Garrett Wilson, and then you got 2 extremely talented wide receivers, and just changes their offense. So he's so smooth. He's just a great receiver. So
big play Olave.
Yeah, I think once getting him back will be a big difference. So kind of, if they had him for Northwestern, I think that ball game would have been a little different. So elite offense, maybe not quite as great as it was last year, but it's still a national title type of offense.
Okay, let's go over to the defensive side of the ball here. Why is the defense good enough to win a title, Ryan?
The defense has been good this year. I think they, one of the kind of narratives is that maybe they're not quite as good. I mean, they obviously lost some fantastic players from last year, like Chase Young, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
That's guy's hard to replace. And then what happened in the Indiana game? They kind of got leaky against the pass against Michael Penix. He threw for almost 500 yards in that particular game. But if you also look back at that game, Ohio State was up 35-7, right, in the second half, and it was pretty well in hand. They thought they had that game closed. And then is when they kind of the floodgate opened a little bit, I think, after they kind of let up. So I'm not going to just look at that game and say, hey, Ohio State doesn't have a good secondary. Their defense isn't that great. They still got some great players. I mean, Tough Borland, Pete Werner, some solid linebackers. They're active there. Justin Hilliard played a really nice game against Northwestern. Sean Wade's a big time corner. So they got some talent. They can definitely up their game a little bit, no doubt about it. But this is still a very, very talented group that can compete against a Clemson offense here. So I don't think Clemson's perimeter game is too earth-shattering, their receivers. So I think that's kind of what's going to help Ohio State in this game and, make it interesting.
Yeah, I'm going to stay positive because you mentioned it is their Achilles heel. But I love the point you bring up, Ryan, about that Indiana game. The narrative that they can't play the pass at all because of that game is a little misleading because of the factors that were going on. In fact, in that game, Shaun Wade actually did have a pick six. He's their stud corner. And speaking of Wade, he would love to atone for his ejection in last year's game, like when he had the targeting against Lawrence. So, but there's no reason to think that this defense with their talent can't at least contain Clemson enough and let their offense do the rest of the work.
Yeah, and one way to win, I mean, they're going to be an underdog in this game, about a touchdown underdog, and likely if they win would of course be an underdog against Alabama as well. So one way to win like that, not that they're some scrappy underdog that needs crazy plays to win, but is getting turnovers, and they're so far third in the nation in takeaways per game. So if that continues, that's obviously a great sign. And they're still eighth in the country. What's that?
Well, it helped that they played Nebraska.
Nebraska.
Our team's a turnover machine.
Well, but yeah, no, it's still a very talented defense. They're eighth in the country in defensive SP plus. D line is loaded with Haskell Garrett, Tommy Tog. I always struggle with his name. Tommy Togiai on the inside, Zach Harrison and Jonathan Cooper on the outside. So their front seven can definitely hold their own. Secondary just needs to kind of up their game a little. All right. Any other positives for Ohio State? Or are we ready to get to the negatives? I'll take that.
Let's go negative.
Ready to go negative. I saw some blank stares there. All right. So here's the reasons why Ohio State will not win the national championship. The first reason is I think everyone talks about playing 6 games, and of course, Clemson. It seems like Dabo Sweeney and all the coaches in the SEC are complaining about that being an advantage. I think here it's a disadvantage because that inexperienced secondary for Ohio State, which is their biggest weakness, probably, it could use some more seasoning. Like they're in midseason form right now, rather than having played a kind of a full schedule. Some of the young receivers after Olave and Wilson could have used some more games. And then the other concern for me, major concern, is Justin Fields. Which Justin Fields is going to show up? Is going to be the one we saw against Indiana and Northwestern, the one that holds on to the ball too long and takes some sacks, or is it going to be the one that was 20 for 21 against Nebraska or whatever he was? So that's a tough one, especially because Clemson is really, really good at getting to the quarterback, causing havoc plays. Like that front seven is tough.
Yeah, and to me, Michael, that's kind of going to be the big matchup here. The main weakness that I see for this Buckeye team going up against Clemson is just the ability to protect Justin Fields, because they give up 3 sacks a game, which is bottom 100s in the country. And you go to the flip side where how Clemson's good at it, they're 4th in the nation in getting sacks. So that's going to be a major factor. If they can keep Fields with a clean pocket, he can do damage with those talented receivers that they have. I wouldn't bet on it. It's just because of how good Clemson's D line is, of course. But that is one major point of weakness there. And then when you go also, it's just Clemson. I mean, Ohio State's defense, excuse me. Have they been seeing a Clemson level offense this year? Right? They haven't. That's the thing. It's just kind of what you touched on earlier, Mike, about their experience, like disadvantage of only playing 6 games. They just haven't had their eyes on a lot of great teams this year on offense. So I think this might be a little bit of a surprise for them, even though they did play last year. A lot of these guys are new, right? They got some new faces. So that's those couple things to me are kind of a concern.
Ryan, you guys both touched on the sacks, and it's pretty remarkable that they give up this many sacks, considering how good the offensive line is, especially in the run game. So for whatever reason, it just doesn't translate fully to the.
And I think Fields is a lot to blame for that. Like he's great, but one of his weaknesses is holding on to the ball too long.
Yeah. Exactly. Because Michael, your point, you said which Field shows up, some of the bad games he's had, and Clemson with Venables, they had a good game plan for the most part on him last year and forced 2 picks, and he had only thrown 1 prior to that the whole year. So, and then when you look at their secondary, I can't believe, but they finished worst in the Big Ten against the pass. That's just an astounding figure, even though, because they had Shaun Wade come back, but I know there was some new blood there, losing Okudah and guys like that, but it's just still astounding with the talent that they have. And then when you look at for their defense as well, they had a hard time even with the entire NFL roster that they had, essentially, with Chase Young and whatnot. They had a hard time stopping Clemson. Even it's gonna be difficult to bottle up Etienne and Lawrence, and then even if they do get past Clemson, which of course they could beat Clemson, I'm not saying they can't. Then can their defense, is it good enough to withhold the Alabama juggernaut? That's a tall order to do 2 games in a row for me.
All right, so we presented the good and the bad here. Trey, what's your prediction for how Ohio State fares in the playoff?
I am going to lean 34-28 Clemson.
Look at these scores, guys!
All of our scores are insane. We all predict pretty much the exact same success for Ohio State here. I think the Buckeyes will just barely cover that touchdown spread. They're going to be motivated as ever to beat Dabo after he ranked them 11th. He dissed them. And I would not be surprised if Ohio State beat Clemson. Yes, they're a notch below. This Buckeye team is a notch below what they were last year, but Dabo and Clemson they've owned this new rivalry. They've won bowl games against them 3 of the last 6 years. The Tigers, they've just been so dominant in the last 4 or 5 games or so, and I think that they'll prevail in this one.
Yeah, if Justin Fields hadn't had 2 off games, if he'd played like he had in all the other games against Indiana and Northwestern, then I might take Ohio State in the upset. But because I just don't totally know what to expect from him in this game, and because I think Lawrence will throw all over that Ohio State secondary, I'm taking Clemson 34-27. I do think it'll be a good game, though. I don't think it's going to be a blowout.
No, none of us are predicting blowout here for sure. But I do look at these 2 teams, and you can't help but compare to the game last year and who they have back and how they're playing. And to me, Ohio State just has not been nearly as dominant. They kind of struggled a couple times. Obviously, we touched on this year. They just have not been a consistent group. Where Clemson, they obviously lost some nice pieces on their team as well from last year, but their plan is about as well as they have all year right now, coming off of a dominating performance against a previously unbeaten team. So they're firing on all cylinders. I just think they're better. I just trust them more. So I'm going to give them the 11-point victory and say they do cover that spread.
All right, there you have it. Once again, let us know in the comments your prediction for the game and if you think Ohio State's going to win it all. So thank you for watching the College Football Bros. If you enjoyed this episode, give us a thumbs up and consider doing everything that Sarah is about to tell you in the outro. Yep.
You've been watching the College Football Bros. Be sure to subscribe here on YouTube and in your podcast app for college football content all year round. For bonus episodes and access to our Discord chat, join our Patreon at patreon.com/collegefootballbros. Thanks for watching.